a nuclear physicist, author, lecturer, and teacher he teaches at the College of Jewish Studies Asia Tourist Discovery Seminar, Essentials, and the Fellowships Program, as well as the Executive Learning Center, who focuses on what he perceives to be an inherent relationship between science and spirituality. Dr. Schroeder received his BS, I guess that's your bachelor's, is that what it is?
BS.
Okay, BSc. In 1959, his master's in 1961, and his PhD in nuclear physics and earth and planetary sciences in 1965 from MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He worked for 5 years on the staff of the MIT Physics Department. He was a member of the United States Atomic Energy Commission. The several Sfarim that he has written, and tonight the topic is on the book Genesis and the Big Bang and everything behind that. Another book, The Science of God, The Hidden Face of God, and God According to God. So we suggest that you go out to Amazon or wherever you go and purchase your books, and without any further ado,
Listen to God.
there you go.
Always a good idea. Always a good idea to listen to God.
Listen to what?
Always a good idea to listen to God.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's what I said about actually, Noah Weinberg, the founder of Asia Torah, said, can you imagine if Star Wars had said, instead of listen to the Force, listen to God, the theater would have emptied in a flash.
Exactly.
But listen to the Force gets by.
Yes.
Yeah. So the topic this evening about the universe, just looking for one particular, I thought I had it right in front, but I don't, is to try to understand how we can have a universe that's billions of years old and a biblical age of the universe that is very strongly embedded in less than 6,000 years. So I think that's the basis of this discussion this evening, and the problem is primarily that people who know a lot of science know very little, often very little Bible. People who know a lot of Bible often know very little science. And so it looks like there's conflict when there really can be confluence between the two. And that's just the key to both of the topics. So we'll deal a bit with the age of the universe and other topics if they come up in our interest, whatever topics may interest other people. So the biblical New Year, Rosh Hashanah, okay, 5777 approximately. Rabbi Schwab has a whole very long article on how we might be off by a few hundred years on that calculation, but the calendar says 5777. Most of them say. Dates back to what? In other words, what does Rosh Hashanah commemorate? That's the question.
Birth of the planet Earth.
Okay, birth of the planet Earth, birth of the universe.
Or Nisan.
What?
Nisan or
Well, that may be whichever month, but what does it what happened on day 0 on the calendar? Okay, what? Yes, but you hear other voices saying the creation of the universe, but it's Adam. You be careful of the word man, because Adam was not a man. Remember, we're told also in Genesis chapter 1, when about verse 26 or chapter 1 of 26, 27, but also explicitly in chapter 5 when it starts to mention the third child, Seth. So we're told in the second chapter 5, verse 2, this English matches the Hebrew. God created them, male and female, and called their name, what? Adam. God created them, male and female, and called their name Adam. Adam was not a man. There was Mr. Adam and Mrs. Adam. God created them, male and female, and called their name Adam. Their name. It is only later, no, don't put it here, I'll spell it for sure. Thank you for the offer, though. You can drink it. So, I don't want it. I can't. The episode in the second chapter with the separation of the two of them, there's some very interesting words that are used there. In other words, the separation has used that Adam, that God built the other part. It's interesting. It's an interesting use of a word, and the Talmud points out that the use of the word binyan has the basis of bina, and so the idea that the woman brings bina into the relationship with Adam. Even that's why Adam later names, when we have Mr. Adam, Mrs. Adam, we see it clearly because even we have it right at the beginning. The first thing Adam calls the woman is Isha, which is Mrs. Ish. He's Ish and she's Isha. So that acknowledges it right there. But later, after Adam realizes that he's done a few stupid things in his life, he renames his wife to be, but what's the Hebrew name? Chava. Now, why does he call her name Chava? I mean, the text says he calls her Chava because she's the source of life. Really? Chava means life? Chava doesn't mean life. Chaya means life. Chava is a different word altogether. Doesn't mean life at all. This I learned from Rabbi Shlomo Riskin. You find the meaning of Chava in Psalm 19, about verse 2 or 3. And it turns out that Chava is a source that brings forth knowledge or information. So it's very interesting. Chava is a vastly deeper word than Chaya. Why do you call it Chaya? That's source of all life, call it Chaya. Hi. But it calls it Chava. And it's interesting nuance there because, again, Chava doesn't mean life. Chava means a source of information. As you see, as it's used in Psalm 19, about verse 2 or 3. Okay. So anyway, so we have this. So this is that's just an aside of that Adam is Adam, Mr. and Mrs. Adam. But the idea is that the creation of the universe happens way before the creation of the soul of Adam. In the biblical understanding, about 5.5 to 6 days earlier. Now my phone may ring, and I didn't turn off the because one of our daughters may have pneumonia, etc. You can realize what that means. It's falling dominoes with children at home, etc., etc. So if it rings, I will have to take the phone call. She was on her way to the hospital when I left the house. Okay. So we have a creation of the soul of Adam for Rosh Hashanah, and that would be verse 27 of Genesis chapter 1. So we have not the 6 days, but the Talmud says that Adam was created halfway through the 6th day. It was 5.5 days after the creation. 5 days and halfway through the 6th day. The Talmud makes that statement, and also we see it if you look at the number of verses allotted to day number 6. The number of verses allotted to day number 6 of Genesis chapter 1, Adam falls spot on right in the middle. So that might be the source of the Talmud's logic for Adam being created during the 6th day. Because no Chazal holds by that creation being his body. The Ramban, the major Kabbalistic commentary on the Torah, says 3 times over in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, 2, and 3, that there's one physical creation, the first sentence of the Bible. All other creations aren't physical, so it wouldn't be physical. So either physical or spiritual. Yeah. Verse 21, where God creates the animals, but you got animals already in verse 20. They're different names. They're all guesses for what the animals were, but it can't be their bodies, so it has to be the soul, the nefesh. The nefesh of. Oh, I told you. For those watching the camera, a glass of water was just spilled. Okay, the nefesh, the soul of Adam. Right now we see verse 26. God says, "Na'aseh Adam, let us make Adam," and then verse 27, God creates the Adam, et ha'adam, the Adam, and that, as Peggy Ketzer pointed that out to me, that can't be Adam's body. It was only one physical creation. Everything is made from the Genesis chapter 1, the stuff in verse 1, that creation. So it's Adam's soul, that's the neshama. So animals get one nefesh, one soul, nefesh. Humans get 2 souls, nefesh and neshama. That's why we're so schizophrenic. Animals don't have that problem. The nefesh says, take it easy, enjoy life, do whatever you want. The world is my apple to eat. And the neshama says that's really not quite true because there are other beings out there that have a portion of this world. So it's in the ego of Freud. It's nothing, Freud knew this stuff, and that's where he gets probably maybe where he got the information, that idea. But we see it in humans also. So, but the Torah makes it explicit that we have 2, and that also is why when we look in chapter 2, every Israeli school child in Kita Aleph already knows this. If you look at chapter 2, verse 7, it says God formed the Adam, dust of God, etc. The Yetzer Vav Yud Yud Sadi Resh. Vav, Yud, Yud, Sadi, Resh, 5 letters. When you look a few verses later, in verse number 19, we're talking about God forming the animals. The grammar is identical. And God formed the animals. Vayetzar, same word, same tense, etc. Vav, Yud, Sadi, Resh, 1 Yud. So in verse 19, where it's talking about the animals, they get 1 Yud. When in verse number 7 of chapter 2, when we talk about the forming of humans, you get 2 Yuds. And it can be any number of things, but it's easiest at this point just to relate it to the nefesh for the animals, the 1 Yud, and nefesh, and the neshama, the 2 Yuds. It's clearly not a spelling error. I mean, give the Bible a break. It's not a spelling error. It's deliberate to teach something. So we humans have these 2 drives, and according to the Bible, that goes back just a few thousand years, namely about a bit less than 6,000 years, the first humans appear. So I just want to jump through that, and then we'll see how that, from there forward, how the rest of the world works. I don't think there are many people that actually believe, well, no, there may be people, I don't think there are any people that have actually studied any science that actually believe that people only go back 6,000 years. 90,000 years ago, people started to bury their dead. Now, lest anyone get upset about what I'm about to say, we have Noah Weinberg, the founder of Aish Torah, made it very clear. In any discussion, the first thing you have to do is define your terms, okay? So when the anthropology textbook and the museum and the anthropology teacher talk about people going back 90,000 years, by 50,000 years ago, people were making clever tools. They've been burying their dead for a long time now. By 10,000 years, people invent farming. It takes a lot of intelligence to invent farming, also foresight, because why would you put grains in the ground? There's not a supermarket. There's no Osher out down the street to get you whatever you can eat at. You're crazy to put the grains in the ground. But you have to have the foresight that maybe 1 grain in the ground gives you 100 grains later in the year. So that takes great foresight, and that goes back about 10,000 years. Farming is invented in the world, as at least at the moment for all the information we have, right nearby here where Israel and Syria touch. From pollen studies you can pretty much determine about when farming is, and from the measurements in different parts of the world, it looks like that we, in fact, in this area did the invention. That takes great insight. That's 10,000 years ago. So, but the Bible only gives us less than 6,000 years for Adam. And that's the nuance in the definition of people. The anthropology textbook defines a person as a being that looks like you and looks like me, has your brains and my brains. The anthropology teacher has the same definition, and the museums have the same definition. A person is a being that looks like you, looks like me, has your brains and my brains. In other words, Homo sapiens sapien. But the Bible has a nuance in the definition. The Bible's definition of a person is a being that looks like you and looks like me, has your brains and my brains, and has a neshama. Yeah. The neshama changed the world. The neshama changed the world to the extent that the world actually shows a sociological change. And this time, the other time I didn't have any of my notes with me, but this time I think I have some notes with me. The change in the world is so dramatic, so extraordinary, that the British Museum has an entire exhibit. And the exhibit, not the Science Museum, the one in London, here is a photograph of the plaque on the wall, which tells you what you're seeing. And here I am at that plaque right there. Barbara and I were giving lectures. As you know, it's Barbara Sofer. We're giving lectures. It's worth actually seeing that. We're giving lectures back to back in London. We do that fairly often, and not necessarily in London, but back to back lectures. And we had an afternoon off. We went to the British Museum, having no idea what we'd see. And there in the Mesopotamian wing, 2 flights up, was an entire wing, not a room, a wing devoted to an exhibit called The Earliest Cities. And it lists the changes that took place. And what's so amazing is they give a date for when this change came for the earliest of cities. Now, I can never guarantee that the British Museum is correct, but it is probably the most important museum anywhere for this part of the world. And the date that they give for the change in society that was so extreme that they would devote an entire wing to this change in society is about, the number they give is 5,500 years ago. Sound familiar? It's right after the Bible says the neshama is created. And then the neshama spreads, and then bingo, you've got cities. Now, I spoke with the curator of the, by luck, thank God, I'm not luck, I say thank God literally. So I was able to speak with the curator while I was there, and we had a long discussion. I didn't mention Bible, didn't mention neshama, didn't mention nefesh, didn't mention Adam, and didn't mention 5770s, goes back to 75 or so, it was a few years ago. I just asked him, what was the change? Why did it change? Well, it lists it here also. Writing was invented, trading was invented, large cities appear for the first time. So what made this all happen? Well, he said, well, the need for writing, as it says in the plaque, was the need to record economic transactions. Because before the neshama, you couldn't have large cities. But once you have the neshama, for the first time in the history of these Homo sapiens sapiens, because now they're being Homo sapiens sapien monotheisticum, to use Rabbi Sturman from the Magusha's definition, Homo sapiens sapien monotheisticum, for the first time, beings that didn't look like you, smell like you, and talk like you could live together. That's why you could have a city. Before that time, if you didn't look like me, smell like me, talk like me, I had you for dinner, literally. It was a dog-eat-dog world. There were no humans there. They were people, but they weren't humans. And the British Museum dates the change. It wasn't a physical change. It was a social change. The British Museum is, as I say, is the most important museum in this part of the world. Writing is invented, trading is invented, large cities appear for the first time, and what is the like the domino effect? Well, writing. Once you have large cities, you have division of labor. So Sam and his clan live in the city, while Frank and his clan live in the farm. Before this time, every chamula, every clan did everything. You know, mom did something, dad did something, the cousins, the kids, etc. Okay? But once you have a city, you have division of labor. Because the guys and gals, the families living in the city, let's say they weave baskets all winter long. Okay? Big storage baskets. But Frank on the farm and his family are growing corn all winter long. So what happens, comes the spring, Sam in the city picks up these really heavy, huge, big woven storage baskets and carries them out to Sam on the farm. To Frank on the farm, drops them down and says, Frank on the farm, you know what? You need my baskets because there's no more corn coming till the next growing season and your corn's going to get moldy. Store it in my baskets. They breathe. You have plenty of food for your kids. And I'll give you 48 of these provided you give me 2 baskets for my kids back in the city. And Frank on the farm says, Sam from the city, you are a gift from God. Thank you. It's exactly what I need. But then Frank on the farm breaks the bad news from Sam from the city. Sam from the city, you came out 2 weeks too early. The corn won't be ripe for 2 more weeks. Leave your baskets here. Come back in 2 weeks and get your corn. And what is Sam from the city saying? Yeah, Frank, good idea, but let's write it out. Frank on the farm, oh, Sam from the city. Writing is, this is all the British Museum. Writing is invented because bartering is invented, trading. Trading is invented because of division of labor. Division of labor is invented because of the first large cities. Some clans are in the city, some are on the farm. That's the British Museum up to there. Read the plaque. What they don't answer is why the first cities appear. And I asked the curator, that was just so magnificent. I said, look, you're telling me the first cities go back about 5,500 years. The Tower of Jericho goes back 10,000 years, I tell him, because that much I knew. He said, yeah, but don't confuse the Tower of Jericho with the Jericho that Joshua fights thousands of years later. It's the same water source. It's the same oasis. But by the time of Joshua, thousands of years later, it was a huge city, a few kilometers or a few miles on a side. At the time of Joshua, the Tower of Jericho from 10,000 years ago was a marker for the land. It was a land marker that said, this is my land, stay off it. Don't come near, or as I said, I'll have you for dinner, literally. It was a dog-eat-dog world. So that bit was resolved. But I said, so new? So what was the change that brought the first cities? And he had an answer, a very good answer, and it's the kind of answer that the Talmud talks about in Berachot, about the 4th daf. And it says the following, teach your tongue to say, I don't know, because that was his answer. We have no idea. We have no idea what made this change. I have the idea. We know the idea. The neshama came into the world and changed the world. It's not a population explosion. population explosion goes back 10,000 years to farming. Because once you have farming, you can have big families. Before farming, you could not have big families because you're following the herd. There's only a limit to how many babies you can carry. But once you have farming, you're sedentary. You know, you can have large families, and large families do start up here. But it's not a population explosion that caused the cities, because that's 4,000 years before the cities. So what was it? He said, we have no idea. The Neshama tells you exactly why. I mean, the dating is overwhelming. The Bible makes a claim 3,500 years ago that there will have a change that took place when this spiritual force came into the world that would change beings into humans, not physiologically. The Rambam in the Moreh Nevuchim, and the guy for the Perplexed, Maimonides, the year 1190. Unfortunately, it was written in Arabic, as he also expresses disappointment that he wrote it in Arabic, but that was the lingua franca for the Jews at the time. If you don't speak Arabic, you might as well read it in English or whatever your best language is. The Maimonides describes beings at the time of Adam that had the same shape and the same intelligence as humans. The same shape and same intelligence, and it's a mixed group tonight, but I'll tell you, Adam and Eve split for 130 years. We see that at the end of chapter 4, beginning of chapter 5. Adam was out on the town, had children by these other women. The Radak says they were Banim Mamash. The Radak is about the year 1200. Notice this is all before people are digging up the fossils. I better put that in my book. No, because the text makes it clear. The text makes it clear. These beings were there. And if the Radak says the children that Adam sired were Banim Mamash, actual children, then that means in modern terms they were genetically the same, which they were. They just weren't spiritually the same. Obviously the Radak didn't use genetically, just said they were Banim Mamash, actual children. They just weren't. They weren't spiritually things. They weren't humans. They were beings that had the same shape and the same intelligence. They were Homo sapiens sapiens, but they weren't Homo sapiens sapien monotheistem, to use again Rabbi Stern's word for the differentiation. Okay, so that solves any problem with people saying, well, how can it be that Adam was only 6,000 years ago? Yeah, Adam was the first human, the first being with a neshama, and it changed the world. It just changed the world. It's amazing. When I saw that number, I literally, it's embarrassing to say, but I almost started to cry. I mean, because there's a limit to how many things you can just bump into and realize that it's actually true. You know, I mean, you're supposed to believe it's true, but there's always a question. You know, otherwise you wouldn't have halacha. You know, everybody says. So anyway, is that a question?
Yes. That being said and done, I have a friendly discussion with our host. In the 20 years since I first heard you tell me this, people say today that if you don't believe that the world is 6,000 years old, you're not the course.
Well, it depends. Go ahead. Well, that could be the case, actually, not because, especially if you don't know the physics of time. But the physics of time makes the world, in the perspectives of time that are listed in the Bible, less than 6,000 years old. Because all of ancient commentary, with no exception, and the two major ones are the Ramban, Nachmanides, and Rashi, okay? Both say that the days, for those who aren't aware, we're talking about now Genesis chapter 1, and there's 5.5 days that come before Adam. So from Adam forward, it's less than 6,057 for this year. But the Bible says there is evening, morning, day one, evening, second, etc. That those days are not sunrise, sunset, but they're 24 hours each. There's no exception to that. I won't bother asking everyone to raise their hand, but I'm sure everyone, or almost everyone in this room, has heard the idea that days weren't days, they were really long periods of time. Bend the Bible to match the science. Bend the science to match the Bible. All of Chazal tell us the days are 24 hours each, and one student once says, well, what about the hours? And the Ramban seemed to have foreseen that question, because the Ramban says, Kamo Sheshet Yemei Avodah, like the 6 days of a work week. So you can't even say the hours are wrong. So we have 6, we have 5.5, because remember Adam's creation is at 5.5 days. 5.5 days from the creation till Adam, creation of the universe, and then we have Rosh Hashanah from Adam forward. That's the meaning. Why is it on Rosh Hashanah following in the Ashkenazi service, and I'm not sure what the Sephardi service, but the Ashkenazi service, Hayom Arat Olam, Hayom Yamid B'Mishpat. It's the only sentence that everyone hears. I'll tell you, give enough talks and you realize no one is ever listening to the whole talk. I have an example right here, okay? No one is listening to the whole talk. But when the shofar blows, everyone listens. And in the Ashkenazi service, there are 6 sentences, 3 and 3 on each day, and the identical sentence is said all 6 times, like Chazal was trying to hammer it home. Why did they give us 6 separate? If everyone listens at the shofar blowing, why did they give us 6 different sentences that were really Ikarim? Because the Ikar of Rosh Hashanah is Hayom Harat Olam, Hayom Yamid Mad Mishpat. This is the birthday of the world. Today we stand in judgment. Well, that doesn't make sense. What does the birthday of the world have to do with standing in judgment? Except that the birthday of the world talks about the creation of the neshama. Because only after the neshama can you have judgment. A lion eating a lion is not an avera. It's not a transgression. Lions eat lions. A lion, God forbid, eating a person isn't an avera. Lions eat people also. It's not a nice thing to happen, but the lion isn't sinning. But people killing other people, for murdering other people, to say murdering other people is. Killing is a different story, but murdering is clearly. So that's it. This is the birthday of the world. Today we stand in judgment. It only makes sense if the birthday of the world, Hayom Harat Olam, relates to the creation of the soul of Adam. And then you can stand in judgment. So that's the nuance in that sentence that's so important, so central, that it is the sentence that Chazal chose that everyone should listen to, because it comes immediately, with no break, following the blowing of the shofar. It's the only sentence that everyone hears. Okay, so now we have now 5.5 days, 24 hours each, like the 6 days of a work week, leading up, bingo, to Adam, and then this 57, 77, it'll change year by year going forward. So what is the clue? The crucial part of this has to do with the Ramban Nachmanides brings down. But just as a slight aside before this, you should realize that there's some basic problems in the English translation. Okay. The basic problem in English translation is almost everyone reads the ending of each day as things go by. There's evening and morning. Yom Echad, one day, and more things happen. Evening and morning, a second day. Just because I'm dealing with the English now, the mistake in the English. More things happen, evening, morning, a third day. And then on 4th days, they say the shoe hits the floor. And what's the big event of the 4th day? 2 great lights. One for the day and one for the evening. Oh, they must be what? The sun and the moon. Got a problem with evening and morning? Day 1, evening, morning, a second day? That's the problem with relying on English translation. It is true that text is Erev, and in modern Hebrew, and even in the Bible, Erev does mean evening, and Boker means morning, but the Ramban points out that it can't be what they call the silver dish reading. It must be the golden apple. It's a statement from Proverbs 25, verse 11. A word well spoken is like apples of gold in a dish of silver. The silver dish reading is Erev, means evening, but you can't use the silver dish reading because there's no sun mentioned yet. So there must be a deeper meaning. It's totally Ramban. When it's Schroeder, I'll let you know. Okay? So what does the Ramban say? You have to look for the root. What's the root of the word of Erev? The root of Erev is essentially the same root as the word Eruv. Why does an Eruv work? Obviously, it's the Rabbanan. If it was the rice, you couldn't have an Eruv. But why does an Eruv work? Because it mixes all the domains. See, the root meaning of Erev isn't evening. That's a derived meaning. The root meaning of Erev is mixture, chaos. And as the Rambam points out, the reason that we rate it to evening is because when the sun sets, vision becomes blurry, chaotic. He says it's the exact opposite for the morning. There's no sun, so it can't mean morning. Boker Tov does mean good morning in modern Hebrew. In biblical Hebrew, for Genesis chapter 1, Boker cannot mean morning. Guess what? No sun till the 4th day. So how can you have Erev and Boker, Yom Echad, Erev and Yom? Boker, the root meaning of Boker is the exact opposite, like care to recognize, right? Can you distinguish between blue and black? And that means order. The text is a phenomenal statement, much more interesting in the age of the universe. What the text is saying, that Erev gave way to Boker, that chaos gave way to order. That's what the text is saying. Not that there was evening. It's totally the Ramban. That stage by stage to higher and higher levels of order till you get to people. It's phenomenal. It's a phenomenal insight that the Ramban brought down. The text is telling you something phenomenal happened because it is I don't know if the Ramban knew this. Maybe he did. He probably did. It is an unequivocal statement. There is no caveat to what I'm about to say. No limit to well, maybe if this, that, and the other thing. Order never arises spontaneously from a disorderly system and remains orderly unless something in nature recognizes that order and it's built in. Order never arises spontaneously. Order can arise spontaneously from a disorderly system, but it always decays back to disorder because nature likes homogeneity. Nature, that's why mountains wash to the sea and bodies decay in the grave. Unless something in nature is already built in as if it were expecting that order or embraces that order and locks it in, order doesn't arrive. But that's what the text is telling me, that something phenomenal happened in this, that stage by stage or day by day, or however you want to see it, goes higher and higher levels of order till you get to the phenomenon of life and consciousness. And the Torah is amazed by that. And it subtly brings it down by slapping the sun down on day number 4. Okay, so we're forced. So anyway, so we have these, now just jumping back to the age of the universe. So we have a age of the universe that gives us 5.5 days until we get to Adam. Now the description, a reason that the Torah makes the break at Adam also for the age of the universe and has the 6 days separate is that the description of time for the 6 days of Genesis is unique. Nowhere else in the Torah, on the Tanakh, you find time going, there's evening and morning. Day 1, evening and morning a second day, evening and morning. No, that evening and morning bit doesn't appear anywhere else. Okay, so we have that evening leading up to Adam. Then from Adam forward, we know the perspective of time because as Adam and Eve live XYZ years, have a kid named Enosh. Seth lives QVW years, has a kid named Enosh. Enosh lives such and such. Adam and Eve are having kids on earth and not out in outer space. So the perspective of time for Genesis chapter 1 from Adam forward is earth time. The question is, what is it from the biblical time for the time before Adam? Because the description of time changes. And it's that reason that at the creation of the soul of Adam, the perception of time changes. And the Ramban gives the answer to this. The Ramban says the nuance in the numbering is the answer. I realize, I apologize, keep using his name. He should have been here to give the, but I don't think he has a website. Unlike Isaac Newton, who still has a website, I don't think the Ramban has a website. And maybe, I haven't checked it actually. So what's the difference? The Rambam gives it very clearly. At the end of each day, the day is numbered. The difficulty with the numbering of the days is the form of the number changes from ordinal from the absolute to the comparative, to the ordinal to the cardinal. I think that's what it put in from the day 1, evening 1, day 1, but the next doesn't say day 2. It says second day, third day, fourth day. Comparative. So why does the text say day 1? Now I assure you that Ramban knew Rashi very well. 1 day, God, one day, but the Ramban's into Tachlis, not the philosophy. The Tachlis, how the world is put together. It's the golden apple. Text says day 1, he points out, because there wasn't yet a second day. Now the Ramban had actually read the Bible a few times, so he knew that the Bible wasn't given, the Torah wasn't given to Adam. It was given to Moses on Sinai. And the nice thing about knowing their ages, you can just add up the years. Add, and you come to Moses on Sinai as 2,448 years after Adam. Well, what's he telling me? It wasn't a second day. By the time you get to Moses, there have been 2,448 years, times 365 days a year, comes out to just under 900,000 days. By the time you get to Moses on Sinai, there'd been 900,000 second days. And this is his insight. If the view of time for the 6 days of Genesis were from Sinai looking back, the Torah would have written this evening and morning a first day. But it writes day 1 because there had not yet been a second day. And that's what we all see from the world wars. That in the world wars, no one called, except the pessimists, but no one called the First World War the First World War. It was the Great War, the big war. But by the Second World War, the First World War became the First World War. I always give my same example because it's very personal. I fought in the First Lebanese War. None of us fighting in Lebanon, the first Lebanese war, including my 4 buddies that didn't come back from that first Lebanese war, called it the First Lebanese War. We were fighting in Lebanon. Now, why would I have to say I fought in the First Lebanese War? Why don't I just say I fought in Lebanon? Because,
there was a second one.
Very sadly, there's been a second Lebanese War. Exactly. It's exactly the same. It's just, the Torah writes day 1 because there hadn't been a second day. Really? By the time you get to Sinai, there have been hundreds of thousands of second days. The only perspective of time that allows, that essentially forces the Torah, or the hint the Torah is giving, put it that way, is that when there hadn't been a second day, it's on the first day. The Torah sees time from the beginning looking forward. And once you know anything about cosmology or astronomy, that's the answer. I can tell you, if I have a student in class, because the students change at age, it's not like a whole year at a time, and has taken AP in astronomy, they can finish the class right there. I can sit down. And if everyone realizes, it's not a secret, any measurement that we make of a distant, if you're not right there at the beginning, right there at the event, but you have to see the event with a telescope over time, well, that information has to travel to, you don't see it lifetime. If the galaxy is 5 billion light years away, it took 5 billion years for light to reach you. That's the definition of a light year. How long it takes to travel 1 light year is 1 year. But what happens in the galaxy, what happens in a universe, this is the NASA diagram, just hold it to the camera. This NASA, everything on here is from NASA, the National Space Authority, except, does it say that? No, everything here is, except my notes that are scribbled all over the bottom. We have a creation of the universe, and it expands out. Again, this part of the diagram, we have that really, we didn't know it was going to be so popular, but it is popular. Proof of God in 5 minutes deals exactly with this part of the diagram, the creation. I urge you to look it up. For those that haven't heard me make this blurb before, there are over 4 million views saying it's just this, the creation. That's proof of God in 5 minutes. But here we have an expanding universe. So the universe is getting larger and larger. This is a diagram of time. Creation, each line is another billion years. Over time, the universe starts at a small point, expands out. And the oval out here is where we are. And we live on that oval. The oval is to show the universe is expanding in all directions. Okay, this is the timeline.
Question?
Yeah?
If as I understand you to say, after Adam, time was time as we understand it.
In the Bible's point of view. From the Bible's perspective of time is earth time.
If that's the case, then how do we understand the chronology of...
Oh, no, I can't get it. That's different. We'll get to that later.
Living 900
Yeah,
years
that's not a problem, but it's not, that's not a major problem. Any geneticist will tell you can make it happen. But if you have time at the end, we'll get into it, okay? So I'm going to go forward and put this all together. I'll get you in a moment. Okay, so we have this expansion over time. Now, we have no idea what makes the universe expand, but it is expanding. Not like a lettuce or a cabbage, or an onion with layers being added on. The universe gets bigger by space stretching, which, of course, no one has any idea what that means, but that's the only way of understanding the universe. And that's the key, because if you are watching, we live here and we look back in time, and we saw 14 billion years go by. What would those 14 billion years look like from the beginning? We measure this age by looking at galaxies far in the depth, and we see the light coming to us through space. We don't go out to space. We get it when it comes here. But space is stretching. And so as a light wave, because light is both a particle and a wave, which is something that is impossible to fit into a human brain, but we know that has to be the case, or your iPhone wouldn't work. Okay, so light travels through space as a wave, but the space through which it's swimming or traveling is stretching. So the wavelength actually stretches out. And the further away it is from us, the more it's stretched. And by measuring the amount of stretching, thanks to the work of Henrietta Leavitt, who almost got the Nobel Prize but died of cancer before she could get it, and Hubble bases his measurements totally on her insight. Okay, the Hubble telescope at Sedler. He had nominated her for a Nobel Prize because he knew how important her work was, but she died, so she didn't get the Nobel Prize. In any event, the work by Henrietta Leavitt and Edwin Hubble allows us to measure the rate of expansion of the universe. Now there's hundreds of other people that use that approach. And if we can measure the rate of expansion of the universe, so we can measure over time the rate it's expanding, and if we know from this year to next year how it's getting bigger, so what you can do is run the equation backward in time. So if it's from this year to next year, well, what about this year to last year? To millions of years ago, to billions of years ago. And when you run the equation back in time, it takes 14 billion years to get back to here. So that's the key of how we make that measurement. And that measurement is based on hundreds of measurements at least. Okay, so we have a creation to the universe. Yes?
What is it expanding into?
That's a great question. I had a student in Dallas, Texas, must be maybe 5 years ago. And I was teaching this to like second and third graders. And her question was, if the universe is expanding into maybe God, does that mean God's getting smaller? So we have no idea what it's expanding into. No, it's expanding into nothing. The difficulty, nothing doesn't fit in your brain. I discussed this in the Proof of God in 5 minutes. The black around here is not empty space. Space is in here. What's out here is nothing. But humans you cannot conceive of nothing. Every thought that you have, with no exception, it doesn't matter how hallelujah you are. You may see God in every molecule of the world, which is probably correct. But every thought you have is couched in the box of time, space, and matter. You cannot think out of that box. You can't extract time from your thoughts. Because for instance, if you extracted time from your thoughts, then you would... Right? The camera didn't break. It's just they didn't have time. Nothing would be happening. There's a great quote from I learned it from John Archibald Wheeler in his book, and the Pecan Street Cafe in the men's room wall, written in Texas, Austin, Texas. Time is God's way of keeping everything from happening all at once. Time is God's way of keeping everything from happening all at once. Because if you're outside of time, everything is bosmani, everything is simultaneous. And that's the whole Indian of God knowing the future outside of time, but inside of time, tomorrow has not happened. That's why you do have free will. We talked about that a week ago. Anyway, so we see this measurement going back in time takes 14 billion years. But the Torah sees time from the beginning looking forward. We look back in time. And that's the difference. What would it mean to look from here? So just a really, really quick, I don't know if we talked about this last time, but I don't really remember. But in any event, over here is a galaxy. It's far away, billions of light years away. And over here is our great big telescope. Well, there's a beautiful galaxy. We don't see it lifetime. The light has to travel to us through space. The light travels through space, but space is stretching. So what does that do to the perception of time? On that galaxy, we see a star explodes. It's called a supernova. Huge burst of light, and light goes out in all directions. It's the same in all directions. I'm just going to talk about from here towards our telescope. Boom. A week later, another supernova. So this burst of light traveled a whole week, and then this one started. Now, if that burst stood still, obviously it doesn't. This would bump into it in a week. But it doesn't. It's moving. So they're going to move through time and space. But for the billions of years that it takes to reach our telescope, space isn't static. Space is expanding. So what about the space between the bursts? They're getting further apart. So let's say it takes so long the universe gets twice as big. So now at the galaxy, when it happened, boom, and then a week later, so it's 1 week of time travel. But now it's twice the distance. The first burst hits the telescope, wow, a supernova. But now it's twice the distance. So instead of the second burst reaching our telescope a week later, it reaches our telescope 2 weeks later. My measurement, my perception of the events on that galaxy is 2 weeks. I want to know what it was like back in time, so I have to go back in time. I can't do it physically, but mathematically, I mean, the galaxy might be gone already after these billions of years. But I can call up an astronomer, how far away is the galaxy, how much time does it take back, and you go back in time, and as you go back in time, the universe gets smaller, and the 2 weeks become 1 week. Two perceptions of one time, of one event. If we knew the amount of stretching from the Bible's point of view, looking from the going forward, we could say how much compression there would be. A factor of 2 if the universe is a factor of 2 larger. A factor of 100 if it's 100 times larger. A factor of 1 billion if it's 1 billion times larger. The difficulty is no one will ever know this moment of creation. Because first of all, the universe is opaque for the first several 100,000 years as we measure time. But also, we have no idea at that point, even if it weren't opaque, we couldn't see it because the point is so small that it's beyond, only certain things can be measured. And there's a limit to how you can measure anything. And the only way we can understand the creation of the universe, as Ed Trivan pointed out in 1973, is by quantum physics existing before, I'm not going to, it's just, in any event, a quantum fluctuation, and then the laws of relativity. But anyway, this is not relativity we're talking about, it's just pure astronomy. So the Ramban says, Hazman Nivra, time is created. But then he adds a nuance, and he says, however, Mi Yesh Yifos Bozman. Mishiyesh, when you finally have, you can grab onto something, matter, time grabs a hold, tofes. Hazman Nivra, time is, from Bria, is created, at the creation. However, only when you have matter, Mishiyesh, Yitfospo, will time, Yitfospo Zman, time grabs a hold. And that's interesting, because that's literally correct. The beginning, the Big Bang produced energy. Super powerful light beams, electromagnetic radiation. That energy morphed and became matter. Einstein's famous equation shows how that can happen equals mc squared. And then over time, that matter, we have no idea how these things happen, becomes alive and brain and mind. It's mind-boggling to think about that fact. But what's crucial for the age of the universe is the Ramban differentiates between the creation of the universe, when time is created, at the creation of the universe, Hazman Nivra, and the formation of matter. Now, that we know. Now, the question is, what matter? Well, the first stable matter that defines matter as we know it is protons. Because if you say one proton, you're saying hydrogen. If you say 6 protons, you're saying carbon. If you say 8 protons, you're saying oxygen. We just, some people call it Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, but we call it the first day of the week, the second day of the third week. They're both saying the same thing. So if I just say number 8, or number 8, for the atomic number, then I'd be saying oxygen. In other words, 92, I'd be saying uranium. Okay, I think at this point, I think it's correct. In any event, so protons form at an energy level that is known, because we know the what's called the rest energy of a proton. We know the energy it takes, because remember E equals mc squared. It takes a certain amount of energy to form a certain amount of mass, to change form, to condense as matter. So we know the mass of a proton, so we know the energy level that is required. Now that's interesting, because we know the energy level out here, thanks to Arno Penzias and his assistant, Robert Wilson. Penzias a Jew, Wilson, his assistant, was a Gentile. It's kind of like what Maimonides says, that the Gentiles spread, we brought the information to the world, but they spread the information around with some nuances that are different from our idea. But we are the trunk of the tree of that knowledge, and it's the same thing with Penzias and Wilson. Okay, but just in unnecessary aside. In any event, we know the energy of space here. We know it because hundreds of measurements now. It's essentially by measuring the temperature of space. Not the temperature of the room and the air here, and not the temperature in the space between the sun and the earth, because you have radiation, heavy radiation from the sun. But in space, where it's far from any local, let's say, inputs of energy. And that gives you a temperature, just rounding off numbers, of 3 degrees above absolute zero. So that's about minus 270. It feels like that sometimes, minus 270 centigrade. It's about minus 450 or so Fahrenheit. It's almost absolute zero. At absolute zero, all molecular motion stops. Okay? So the space is pretty cold already. But we know that number. It's called 3 Kelvin, or 3 degrees Celsius above absolute zero. And what's important now, we also know this number. We know the energy level, which essentially can relate that in temperature, of protons. And if we take that ratio, and look what it would look like over 6 days, you can calculate what it would be to see time that we take here and extrapolate it back to here. Because every time the universe doubles, the temperature is halved. Every time the universe gets 1,000,000 times bigger, the temperature goes down by 1,000,000. So taking that ratio, we can say how much larger the universe is here than here, and therefore, just like the galaxy experiment, 2 weeks and going back as space would compress back to 1 week, we can go back in time. It's totally a thought experiment. Make it clear, the view from the Bible looking forward is not human time. It's measured in words of humanity, but it's the Bible's perspective looking forward from the beginning. There are no people back here. Okay? It's the Bible's perspective of time, and hence Yom Echad, day 1. Okay? All that, essentially that's all Nachmanides. We just now have the ability to make those numbers, to put those numbers together. And the equation, I know how to, there it is. The equation of that, and I don't like to put equations on the board because it frightens people, but it's an exponential equation, and that I have to tell you is is, how should I, not my work, but it's my work, but it's, so you have to try to understand how the relationship would be day by day, because we know it's not linear. We know it's not linear because every time the universe doubles, the perception of time halves. But notice how the rate of doubling, let's say the universe is expanding more or less once you get past this sudden inflation, it's more or less constant. Then you have to make a correction out here, okay, but of here. So I used to talk about it in this region here. Every time the space between my fingers doubles, I'm going to say double. Usually I ask people to do it, but they always say double, 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 double. Okay, well, I'm going to move these apart, except for the shaking. I'm going to move them apart at a constant rate. Double, 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 double. Notice what's happening? The rate of doubling is changing very rapidly. When is it most rapid? When the universe is small. When is it most slower? When the universe is larger. Which would imply immediately the first day of Genesis would have most of our time in it. And the equation that it matches, I had to think, what would the relationship be? And then I suddenly realized, my background's nuclear physics. It's the equation I've been using for all these years at MIT and in grad school. There is one equation that is the most common relationship in the entire universe. It's an exponential equation, and it measures the rate of radioactive decay. Every atom, ATOM, in this universe that is not stable decays according to this form. It's an exponential equation, and it's half-life, which would make each day a half-life. Half-life means if I had 1 million atoms here, and it has a half-life of 1 day, then 1 day later I wouldn't have a million atoms, I'd have 500,000 atoms. And 1 day after that, I wouldn't have the 500,000 atoms, I'd have 250,000. And 1 day, an eighth, it's a half, a half, a half. And the equation, I'm not trying to frighten anyone, but if anyone wants to work it out, it is the most fundamental equation available in the universe, and it's A equals A0 e to the minus lambda t. Where A0 is this immediate ratio, and I have no control. What's important is I have no control over this. That A0 is this huge number with the very hot divided by the 3 degrees of today. I'm rounding off the numbers, obviously. So it's a gigantic number, but it's unitless. It's unitless because it's got temperature divided by temperature. So there's no units. That's a problem, except when you integrate this equation, which you have to do. When you integrate the equation, this drops down, and this t and lambda t brings the units of days back into the equation. You integrate this over the 6 days, and you get a number. So the number, I'm just going to call it the average normalized number. Okay, the number that if you average it out over the whole time. That number is, you do it day by day, but I'm just going to take them all together rather than, it's already time to end it. Okay, that number, and I have no control over this, make it very clear. It spins from this number. It's much more interesting when you do it all together, day by day, because I'll tell you, when the numbers came out, it was pretty scary. I mean, I'm just trying to get one of these that doesn't smell quite so lethally. Maybe this, of course, these are pretty. I'm trying to hold my breath here. The number that comes out is, that's the normalized number, okay, from this, but it's much more interesting than day by day. 900 billion. It's a unitless number. It's a unitless number, just like this A0 is a unitless number, because it's the ratio of energy from here to here. The way, what I mean by having no unit, because I want to do this so people understand. If you had 10 degrees, you divide it by 5 degrees, what's the answer? 10 degrees divided by 5 degrees equals?
2.
2 what?
Nothing.
Why nothing? Why not degrees?
Zeros cancel out.
Exactly, these degrees cancel. That's exactly what, it's unitless. It's unitless. So now we have 14 billion years divided by 900 billion. What's so great about this is it's all big. You realize it could be any number under the sun, but it's all billions. So now I have 14 years, because they remain, divided by 900, which equals 15 thousandths of a year. That's the age of the universe from the Bible's point of view. I have no control over this. My only assumption, because I had to find out what the relationship would be, is to take what I would assume the most common relationship in the universe. And we only have 2 things that are common here in this whole statement. Namely, namely that it's superlinear, it's not linear. That is to say, it's half. It's linear would be half, but it's not. Okay. And the other thing is the half period would be day, because it's the only unit, the only number for time given. It comes out to be 15 thousandths of a year, which is amazing, because when you change it into days, you do get 5.5 days. So it's not like a trick. The universe is 5.5 days old. The universe is 14 billion years old. There are two perspectives of time, and the Bible knew it. That's why it starts the calendar from Chazal knew it, and the author of the Bible knew it. And therefore, we have a unique description of time for the first 6 days, and which is never repeated in the text. At the creation of the soul of Adam, the description of time changes. Description of time changes, and with that change in the description of time, the Bible takes on a perspective of earth time. Therefore we read, Adam and Eve live 130 years, if a kid never said, except there's 105 years on earth. That's earth time. So the two perspectives of time, one from the Bible looking forward from the beginning, that's up to Adam, and Adam, it abandons that approach, takes on an earth-based time. Yes? 900 billion? The 900, as I said, it's if I ran out the equation, I wouldn't get 900 billion, but the average over the whole 6 days.
What is that number referring to?
It is just simplicity. The averaged out ratio. It is not the actual. Because if it were linear, and I just took them and divided it, that's the number you would get. It's the ratio of the energy here divided by the energy here. This is a gigantic number. This is a tiny number. That ratio is 900 billion. This is the energy that it takes to make a proton, which is what puts your body into your body, makes the elements. And so we know that number, because when matter forms, time grabs a hold, according to the Ramban. And this is the temperature of space today. So the temperature of space here was very high enough so that it could condense into protons. You realize energy condensed into matter and became you. It's not that the energy disappeared. Like water remains hydrogen and oxygen. It's just that the oxygen and hydrogen joined together becomes water, but it always remains hydrogen and oxygen. The same is true with the E equals mc squared. E equals mc squared does not mean, Einstein's famous equation, that the energy disappears and becomes matter. That's exactly what it doesn't say. It says that energy can change form, take on the form of matter, but it remains energy. So when you look in the mirror in the morning, I'll tell you, for me it's pretty depressing, but you look in the mirror in the morning, you're literally, not poetically, you're literally looking at the age, at the creation of the universe, at the energy of the creation. That's just the reality. Okay, so anyway, so that's that's it. Now, you had a question about how you have these long lifespans. Every form of life has within it a clock that tells you about how long the average is going to be. It's called the telomeres at the end of the chromosomes. Mine that relate to hair have gone away. Notice that? But if we were really good geneticists, they would have come and fiddled with the telomeres like a clock. And every time those chromosomes have to repeat them, duplicate because our bodies are making new cells, the clock runs down. First you lose your hair, and eventually, God forbid, it's going to happen. What, are we kidding ourselves? You lose everything. So if you talk to a geneticist, you say, we're not even close to being able to do it. But if you could, if we had the skills, you could get into the chromosomes and fiddle with the telomeres, the clock at the end, and extend the lifespan. I would say what happened in the world is, if you want to know why was the change following the flood. So now I'll put it in modern terms. There's only 10 generations, first of all. So there's only 10 people mentioned. Okay, so there's 10 people mentioned. And within those 10, they're all dying old, except one dies young, right? Young relative to them. They're 900, he's 200 and something. It's what is it, Enoch? I think it's Enoch, right? Enoch, yeah, okay. So what that tells you immediately, because you only have 10 pieces of data, it's called population genetics. Population genetics says within a population, there's a range of genes. That's what allows things to survive. As the climate changes, as temperature, whatever changes in the climate, what will become dominant will be good for that. So I'm using modern. So the flood comes, which is interesting in itself that God had to revamp the world. I mean, that's a whole lesson in the God in the Bible, but leaving that aside, I mean, it's phenomenal that God had to press the reset button. Maimonides and Nachmanides' debate, was it diet, was it temperature, was it climate, whatever it was, something changed. In modern terms, that's selected for the shorter lifespans, okay? Because we know there's a range of genes available. That's why we have one that dies at a young age. By selecting for the shorter lifespans over time, it isn't that the 900 dropped down to 100 or 200 immediately. It's over the next 10 generations from Adam, from Noah to Abraham, that the life, I plotted them here actually. I didn't plot them actually, my son Joshi, who's now an orthopedic surgeon, plotted them. I think, yeah, here it is right here. Dropping everything all over the floor. If you just plot the data, this is from Adam to Noah, the flood. This is from Noah to Abraham. Notice what's happening. It falls down gradually. I know you can't see, but the trend you can see. These are death ages, birthing ages that follow the exact same. So that it took an explicit miracle for Abraham at 99 and Sarah at 89 to conceive a child. You know what? At that age, it would take an explicit miracle back here also. Not because they were too old, they were too young. The average birthing back here is about 130, so they would have been too young to conceive a child. Out here, they're too old. So that's the change. So my guess is it's selected for, I mean, I'm using obviously modern terminology, but that would let me understand. I have no problem with the ages. I have no problem with people say, well, did the flood really happen? It's immaterial. It's in the Bible to teach. Even, this may sound like heresy, but even if there was never a flood, it's immaterial. It is in the text to teach how God runs the world. The world can get so far off course that God, after only 10 generations, had to say, oy vey, nechamti. God says point blank, chapter 6, verse 7, nechamti, I regret having made the animal world. God says the same thing. God chooses Saul to be king. God chooses Saul to be king. Saul messes up, and guess what word God uses? Nechamti. I regret having chosen Saul king. Now, the bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah picture of God doesn't have regret in that definition. But maybe the bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah of God is wrong. Because the bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah picture of God doesn't have regret anywhere in the description of God. But God does say, nechamti. It's not a parent something statement. And God said, nechamti. Okay?
Can I just mention something? With the flood, I collect stems, so stems is pretty universal. So the stems with the dove, with the olive branch, in China, from all over the world, all different countries, it's a universal symbol. And that is actually from the flood.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
So
yeah.
you
The
get a
United
stamp of the
Nations,
dove,
they should rest in peace.
But it's a universal
Yeah.
theme, and
Yeah.
you see it. So the flood is
Because the flood,
recognized in all religions.
yeah, and there's a flood phenomena around the world. What that meant, you had a question over there, or you answered?
I understand. Vahi Erev, Vahi Boiker, which you said, which was the chaos to...
No, I didn't say that. The Ramban says it.
Ramadan. Okay.
It's a very big difference.
Yes, okay. You're quoting him. But you were saying that the Erev being that we're not sure when it's going to start. Because morning doesn't mean morning, night doesn't mean night.
In the biblical use there, because there's no sun.
Why don't we start counting by Wednesday? Wednesday, then we...
Oh, you could if you want to change the Bible, but the Bible uses... No, I'm sorry. We have the exact question that comes up all the time.
Okay.
I even deal with it in my book.
That's the question.
Yeah, no, because the simple fact is the Bible uses the exact same description of time until...
But now we have something to use.
Yeah,
We can
yeah.
push it on to it.
Then it would have let us know there's a change, but it doesn't change. It's the exact same description. And I'm not trying to rewrite the text. We're told that the days are 24 hours, like the 6 days of our work week. So the days have to all be the same. That's it. I hear the question. I've heard it many times before, but that would be changing the description.
Like you're saying the first day was not the same because the second day didn't start. The first day wasn't the same length.
What?
You said the first day wasn't the same length.
No, they're all 24 hours. But within the first 24 hours for the first day, if you want to see what they are, within the first 24-hour day of Genesis chapter 1, there are 7 billions of hour years folded in. Within the second 24-hour day, it's a video and super fast forward. By the second day, the video is it's still super fast. There's not 7 billion, but 3.5 billion. And the third day has 3.5 divided by 2, or 1.8 or something, etc.
Because of the half-life.
Yeah, exactly, because that's the nature of this equation. And that's the equation that maps the entire universe. But I hear the problem, but I don't think it's, my opinion is it's not a valid problem because it's all lumped as one unit. You know, for evening and morning, day one. Okay, so anyway, Zehu Zeh, as they say, that's that.
Why doesn't Nichamti bother you?
Why doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because I think we have the wrong picture of God. I think we would love to think we would. That's why we're God according to God. You take the picture of God in the Bible, and not the picture that you taught when you're a child, and that's with everyone. Everyone's stuck with that picture. The Catholics say it perfectly. Give me a kid for the first 3 years, 10 years, whatever his life, I'll give you a Catholic for life. We get a picture of God stuck into our brain, and when it's a picture of God, doesn't match the God of the Bible. It's a lovely, fluffy, wonderful God, but it sure doesn't match the picture of the God. By chapter 4, God has allowed Cain to murder Abel. Abel was the good guy. God had accepted his offering. Abel, I think we talked about this last time, the English translation just misses it completely. It says, God, your brother's bloods cried to me from the ground. Not blood, bloods in the plural. The verb there is blood, or the noun there is bloods. So the question is, what's the blood? So Rashi and the Talmud have two different takes on it, but they're both correct. But the Talmud deals with it, when you deal with bloods, because you killed the progeny. Not just he dies, but all the children that would have come. But what Rashi has a much more interesting, in my opinion, more interesting take. Cain didn't know how to murder Abel. He beat him and beat him and beat him, so there's wounds all over the place. Hence bloods. Lots of wounds. Abel didn't die on the spot. Beat, beat, and finally dies. Well, considering that Abel had just had his offering accepted by God, and now he's being beaten to death by Cain, to whom would Abel be screaming for help? Who? God. Guess who doesn't come to help? Expect holocausts. From the God of the Bible, there were holocausts. Anyone living in this room that doesn't accept it, now either God made it happen, I don't think so, or God let it happen. God let Cain murder Abel. Do we know that God could have stopped it? Yeah. How do we know that? Because immediately after when God confronts Cain and tells Cain to beat it, get out of here, I don't want to see you again, Cain gets out and he never shows up again. So God could have stopped the murder. God could have stopped the Holocaust. God could have stopped the tsunami that wiped off 300,000 people. But that's not the God of the Bible. That's the God of the bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah. The simple fact is, Holocaust talk are right up front. That's chapter 4. There are 187 chapters. The 5 books of Moses. By the 4th chapter, the good guy's dead. By the 4th chapter, the good guy's dead. There are all kinds of midrashim that bend over backwards to make us know why Adam, frankly, I apologize, why Adam had to die. I say for that, part of me saying, I won't say what I think about that, but the simple fact is, give it from Adam's point of view. Really?
Hevel.
What?
Hevel.
Oh, excuse me, Hevel. Yeah, Hevel. Thank you, Hevel. His name sounds like Hevel, right? You know, like it's a Hevel. Okay, anyway. And God says Nachamti by chapter 6. Again, of 187 chapters, God says Nachamti. Now, if you read all the English translations you can find, Nachamti means I regret, I reconsider, or I repent. Those are the only 3 translations I found in all the kosher translations.
Reconsiders what they...
Or reconsiders. Fine, or reconsiders. That I've never seen.
What is the mechanism that you understand of why consideration occurs? I mean, one possibility is that facts were not the way they were expected. But of course, that would be hard to say about the Kodesh Baruch Hu, unless you're saying that's your view of what the Kodesh Baruch Hu is, that he doesn't know everything.
I'm just telling what the text says.
No, but I'm not asking a confrontational question. I'm trying to understand Nichamti, which means I regret, let's say.
That's what it does mean.
Well, but in human terms, one regrets something because he took a course of action or thought something or whatever else that was based upon his finite knowledge, and it turned out he was wrong. Mm-hmm. Now projecting that same term to the Kodesh Baruch Hu is kind of hard for me to understand.
Yeah.
Because it would mean that there was knowledge beyond his abilities, which doesn't jive with my understanding of what's going on.
Well,
go ahead.
Well, just taking Saul is very easy. God chooses Saul. The people don't choose Saul. The people want a God. The people want a king. God says to Prophet Samuel, anoint Saul.
Right.
God chose Saul to be king.
Right.
Saul messes up, and God says, "Nechamti," like it or not.
Right, but what is it, well, I don't know what it means. I don't think it
Well,
means.
it means, look, and we can't understand Nechamti in God's terms. We're people.
Right, exactly.
But in people, so stop trying to jump into God's mind. In people's mind, in our understanding of these words, the simple fact is that God changes God. Plan A didn't work, so let's go with Plan B.
I see.
Plan A was 900-year-old people. It's a lousy idea, and God changes it, and we goes to Plan B. 100-year-old people, it's worked a bit better. We hope it continues to work
My
better.
concept, limited as it may be, is that the plan is basically in light terms, sort of like white light. White light being made of a huge spectrum of things, and the prism that spreads out this white light is human beings. And so the way history unfolds depends through who it unfolds, and therefore you get the color that filtered through.
It's
this
a nice analogy.
And so I don't see Nechamti, and what I'm saying is that when it says Nechamti, what it means to say.
When God
is,
says Nechamti,
yes,
it
when
doesn't
God-
say Nechamti.
that's right.
God says Nechamti.
Right, when he says Nechamti, or
Maybe
when
she.
it's said about him that,
Or like
or
her.
it, Nechamti, what it means to say is that from your perspective as a human being, the change has occurred because of the filter that was taken. It was, it could, in
But
other
the
words-
text doesn't say that.
well, the text says a couple of times when these things comes out wrong.
Yeah.
Like when Moshe said to the people, right? Before Kriyat Yam Suf. And then what happens? Moshe prays to him. He says, "What do you Mati Sake Elai?" The
Yeah,
Bnei Israel
exactly.
so, what? Why? That isn't suddenly like Yitzhak or Shuas Hashem.
No, she said
So-
Moses misunderstood
So
what God wanted people
because
to do.
somewhere in that mix over there was you took us out of Mitzrayim so we should die in the desert.
Yeah.
That's what I call the fly in the soup problem. You ruined it because it was supposed to be white light that way. You're going to get across, but you're not going to get across the way you're supposed to get across. With the white light, you're going to go with one of the others.
You know, it's interesting because when I used to commute from the Weitzman back to Jerusalem every week, so we got stuck at a gas station. And I asked the guy next to me, give me a Devar, we're sitting there until the car could be fixed. Give me a Devar Torah. It's very interesting. When the first time it says the Israelites go through the sea and their wall was like war, it's spelled completely with a vav. The second time, for those who don't know the Devar Torah, it's very interesting. The second time it said there's no vav, it's incomplete. And the difference is the first time when it's complete, it was a real wall, and the people that ran forward, it was great. Some of them held back a bit. They don't get quite as nice a wall. You know, they get splashed in the mud. It's an interesting divide how the spelling changed, and you'll see it. It's in the text. Anyway, I have no idea if that's the case, but okay, but we got to, yes.
God said he regrets making the plan didn't work out right when he's infinite and so smart. So God's not perfect?
You just said God's not, was that a question or a statement?
No, it's a question. How can God...
God says Nechamti. What do you want from me? The text says Nechamti.
So God's not perfect then?
Apparently from the text, no. Right?
But we
You're
think
saying
he is.
it. I'm not making that leap, but you're making
Yeah.
the leap from that inference. Does the text? I just need to just because you have to end. Does the text say Nechamti? Yes or no?
Okay,
Yeah.
yes.
Who says Nechamti?
God.
Okay. Get the problem?
What would you tell people like Nathan Slifkin who are trying to be out there in science, combining science and Torah to get attacked by everybody, how to handle things?
Well, I don't know what problem he had. We have a
They put him
different.
there.
Yeah, that was right. That might have helped his book tremendously. I don't know. I was threatened by that once, but the the rabbi didn't do it.
But you have the backing of Asia Torah.
No, they called Aish, and they told they were going to put me in the Aish didn't. The rabbi called Aish. They said expect a call.